Okay, I will call to order the November meeting, caucus meeting of Narberth Borough Council workshop meeting. It is 7:32 p.m. Mr. Metric, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Ms. Rickards?
Here and in the waiting room, if you can let me in.
Okay, 2 places at once. That's a
Yeah.
Ms. Pananopoulos?
Here.
Mr. McGreevy?
Here.
Ms. Elshax?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Mr. Weisbord?
Here.
Mayor Deutsch?
Here.
And President Udrich.
Here. All right. I have no comments. Ms. Mayor?
I just want to thank everyone. We had a election yesterday. I think everybody, I don't have to tell everyone that. Everything went smoothly in the borough, and lots of people exercised their right to vote, which made me very proud of how we did in Narberth. And I just want to thank everyone for their participation in all the many ways they participated.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the discussion item, and Mr. Metric, that goes right to you. 5A, the operating budget for the coming year.
Thank you. I circulated to council preliminary operating budget with some notes, with some changes. I didn't get back any questions. I know it was sent yesterday, so but you'd had previously a prior version of that. I want to make one note about that, and then I think we did discuss a budget item in the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. Maybe this would be appropriate time to bring it up. I received the water usage report from the tax collector, so when it comes time to propose this and make a motion to advertise it for a motion to advertise the preliminary budget, I would request that we amend the sewer rate to reflect a rate of $2.85 per 1,000 gallon. Usage was up in the borough, which drives the rate down. But costs for the sewer fund have been pretty level over the last 3 years in a range of $250,000 to $270,000. So sewer fees should be pretty flat year over year within a pretty narrow range there. That's the only thing I have on my end in terms to bring up with you all today. We did meet with Lower Merion Township today, myself, Chief of Police, Matt West, and to discuss the cooperative service agreement with the township to provide police services to the borough. There was some concerns expressed over shift coverage, and we discussed those. And John will be working with the township to iron out the memorandum of understanding, cooperative service agreement. Those two terms are interchangeable. It's the contract that states specifically what the expectations are in terms of the township providing services and the borough taking advantage of those services. Those dynamics have changed because our department is changing and evolving under new leadership and John's leadership. And once we have that memorandum of understanding in a form to be reviewed by council, I expect that to be an action item as early as December, possibly January. And that would be followed up by we would revisit the second agreement, which pertains to the financial relationship for those services, what that transactional value of those services are. So we're going to address those in 2 steps with the borough.
Comments, thoughts? Hearing none, keep going. Oh, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a budget question, not on this, but on the on another part of the budget. Are you covering other topics? Should I jump into something else, Sean?
So are there any other questions on the police MOU? I'm hearing none. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay. Well, Rob had his hand up.
Sorry, Aaron. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I did just want to comment because we had some discussion of this just prior to our meeting tonight in public health and safety, and John's been giving us the shift coverage numbers, and explained that the shift coverage has been high over the last several months, but those numbers will come back down. So I guess it's just a question: how do we budget, or how are we going to arrive at a kind of equitable agreement with Lower Merion, given the numbers have been kind of up and down?
Since it's in negotiation, I can go over that with some of the details in executive session if you want. But generally speaking, we're trying to agree upon a baseline amount of expectations of coverage, and then some rules that would apply if there's an exceedance or less coverage needed by the borough. We would like really for it to be spelled out so that we don't get into this situation where one side on the agreement's not happy with what they're getting, or the other side of the agreement's not happy with what they're giving and not getting back financially. So we'd like to put some more guardrails around the agreement, for lack of a better word.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this, the police component? All right, Fred, you had another question.
Yeah, so we're being asked to approve essentially a raise for the library director to bring his salary more in line with peers, area libraries. I was wondering if the library staff gets a regular sort of cost of living adjustment or a regular raise every year, like all the rest of borough staff does.
I don't know the answer to that question. If we want those answers, we're going to have to ask them of Linda or Brad from the library.
Yeah, I think we should ask the library to come to the next meeting, and they can give us those answers, Fred.
Okay.
But I think if Sean, if you're able to frame that question in terms of what it's been like over many years, so that they can have that data, past 5 years, what have they done, year over year? Do they have a policy? Do they have a protocol? Do they use Social Security or COLA? How do they come up with it? And then maybe that'll help answer your question, Fred.
If I may as well, Aaron, if Fred or anyone else has questions about that, I can send them over to Linda and Brad, and
you could do it offline too. Sure.
We can do it offline, or we can have them come, but at least we can have them prepared to address those. Mayor?
For what it's worth, I served on the library board for a number of years before I became mayor, and it was pretty standard practice that there was a cost of living raise, as I recall. Mm-hmm. But you want to confirm that with Linda and the board.
Okay. Any other budget questions, Mona?
Yeah, I would be interested to see that, because this is it's a bigger jump in that salary increase. And I'm also just curious about Sean, maybe if you throw in just the number of part-time employees, they could provide us information on that as well. It's hard to see because they're asking for a direct subsidy. It's not necessarily tied to the employees, but it's kind of a lump sum. So.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be happy to provide whatever information is requested.
Okay. Any other budget questions? Yes, Rob.
I just was thinking, when I listened to Sean's presentation about the reserve, so we started to build the reserves with the tax increase last time. So it's something that I'm thinking about, if there's a way that we could, we're not going to have as big a reserve, but maybe we could still have something.
One area, Rob, that might come to mind, given the slight decrease in the solid waste, would be that difference right there. It's not very much, but it sort of would be an opportunity. Sean, I don't know what you think about that.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
You adjusted the solid waste. You're making an adjustment to the solid waste rate, right? It was a slight decrease. Did I misunderstand that?
The sewer fund, yeah,
Yes.
that's a different fund. I think. what
Right,
we're-
it's a different fund, but what I'm suggesting is increasing the borough millage rate to apply more dollars incoming into a reserve for us and using the difference so that the net tax bill remains the same, even though it's different funds.
I understand what you're saying. I should clarify with the sewer fund, because the rate per 1,000 gallons is going down, doesn't necessarily mean your sewer fees are going to go down. The reason
That's correct, because
it's
it's based on
inversely-
use.
it's inversely proportional. So you're
Right.
going to get billed prior 4 quarters water usage. And
Mhm.
my theory is that more of us stayed home and took more showers thanks to
Yeah.
COVID. So
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I withdraw that request. It is too closely related to people's change in lifestyle. But Rob, that's something I think, maybe at our next meeting, after everyone's had a chance for this to sit in and the public has had a chance to take a look at it, I think, we can continue to discuss that. Bob?
Yeah, I'd also like us to think about how we continue to build those reserves, even if it means maybe a slight increase to keep pace with
Inflation.
I mean, the fact that we needed them, we were dependent on them this year, and if we may need a little reserve next year, we may want to increase it. Yeah.
Okay. Fred?
Yeah, one more quick question. So I saw that police pension fund administration went up by about 50%. So it's it's only $4,500 or $5,000, but I was curious what that represented.
there is some administrative services that we're exploring right now. I can get more details on that for our next meeting to go over, and that would be a one-time fee in 2021 to generate a plan document for the police pension plan. We don't have a plan document. That's sort of standard pension management 101. There's never been a plan document. So we're looking at some, with the trustees, we were investigating getting someone in with that expertise to produce the plan document and then provide a little bit of administrative support to the borough, which would be essentially just issuing 1099s and handling some of the back and forth with retirees once they've started to collect benefits. That's a minimal number. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. I've asked the trustees to reconnect with that provider and provide something to us in writing. So I'll be working on that, and we can add more or detail to why that cost is going up. But I think it's just going to be a bump in 21, and then it'll come back down again in 22.
Sean, I think there are some people in the waiting room.
Yeah, you want them admitted now?
Yeah, if you could. I mean, we'll keep them on mute, but I think
Okay.
that's how they plan to watch the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody. If you guys are members of the public, just stay on mute, and when we get to public comment, we'll give you a shot. Thanks. Sorry, any other budgetary questions? Ms. Bezak, could you mute yourself?
Yes, I'm trying. Sorry.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mona.
So, I mean, I just looking at the overall budget, looking at the numbers, it looks like for 2021, our surplus drops to next to nothing. Although although our expenses are reduced by almost 100,000. And I want to just give a nod to the staff, because a lot of, a significant chunk of that reduction in expenses is due to, reducing our debt service and also administration costs. So thank you for that. But I guess I'm just concerned looking at it in terms of, me, I'm always concerned about the future. And I'm just wondering Sean, I know you've been doing an excellent job with the numbers. I'm just wondering, I guess I'm interested. I agree with Bob. I'd like to see how we could still build in some kind of surplus, so that we have that for a rainy day. And it's a really hard time to do that right now.
So Sean, maybe it'll be possible to prepare maybe 2 or 3 different surplus scenarios so that at the next meeting, the council would have the ability to sort of look at them and either maybe choose one or just sort of, you can come up with some different ways that might happen and we can have an educated conversation to make some decisions so that we can adopt the budget on the schedule you've proposed.
Okay.
Anybody else on the budget?
I just want to just remind everybody that I think we may have had 7 or 8 years of no tax increase in the borough, maybe in the, when was it, Aaron? Like from the middle aughts to
Yes.
the middle teens, the middle 20 aughts to the middle 20 teens. There was no tax increase year over year. And at some point then the council was in a very difficult position to have to really bump the taxes hard in order to catch up with the
That's right.
pension funding. And I think that this has been a significant contribution of Sean and the current council to begin to build in a surplus and to have capital fund and that kind of thing. And so I think we are serving the future by at least contributing in some modest way, if not if we're not capable of contributing in a significant way. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? All right, well, Sean, I'd like to extend all of council's thanks to you and the whole rest of your professional staff for putting together this year's budget, which builds on structures you've put in place over many, many years and makes it transparent and clear to the public where the monies are being spent. It allows us to make actionable decisions without having to mentally calculate that things fall in multiple categories across multiple departments. And it sets us up for financial success. So thank you very much. I know it's a lot of hard work, a lot of hours, a lot of Excel, and I know a lot of it happens outside of regular business hours. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
With that, we will move to number 6, Infrastructure Committee. Do you have a report?
Sure. So we started off with a discussion from Matt West, who's the acting director of Public Works, talking a little about his philosophy for Public Works, working to get things on a tighter schedule. And in particular, he talked about the street sweeping. I mean, I think everybody's probably noticed the borough's street sweepers coming through and cleaning up the leaves on the streets. So this is a pilot program. This is a sort of an experimental initiative. We're going to see how it works, and I think it's a perfect time for it, given all the leaves on the streets. Matt, is Matt on the call? Yeah, there you are.
Hi, thanks, Fred. Yeah, thanks. It's something that Public Works Department is piloting, as you mentioned, is a way for us to have more public works exposure out in the neighborhoods. I think it's a good sign for Narberth residents to see the public works in action, and it also benefits the borough from a stormwater management standpoint. We can start quantifying all of the debris that we collect on a street-by-street basis, and then that can add into our efforts to mitigate our stormwater management efforts. So, thanks.
Yeah, my daughter used to enjoy freeing up the dams, of all the leaves that had piled up. So she'll have to find a different way to entertain herself, I guess. We had an update on the Narberth Avenue Bridge. Sean, do you want to give us okay. So basically we're waiting once again on the PUC, the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission, to look over some to approve something. Sean, you have more on that?
I can jump in there too, on that last call with our project manager. So we're working on finalizing the last 2 right-of-way acquisitions. The offers have been made. What's happening with the PUC is that since there are utilities on the bridge, the PUC has to review the plans and they have to approve the relocation of any utility. And so that's the process that we're now waiting on. We've jumped over the hurdle of waiting for Amtrak to review their right of way, and they actually got back to us, and that process is going really well. Now it's on the PUC. So that, hopefully won't take entirely too long. Apparently there are telecommunications lines on the bridge also that we weren't aware of. And so that means Comcast now has to get involved in relocating. So it's a lot of bureaucratic things, lots of plan reviews, lots of different steps to go through. But things are continuing to move forward, and it's looking as though there's nothing that is preventing the project from going forward at this point.
Great. We talked about the pop-up bike lane project. We're still having weekly meetings with DVRPC and borough staff and the cycling club, talking about implementing this. We have the date we're targeting is November 20th through the 30th. So this will be the Friday after our business meeting. And this is to coincide with Cranksgiving, which is a cycling club event. Right now we're looking a lot at outreach, at talking to people who are going to be affected by this and making sure they have the information they need about it, making sure the public knows about it. So we're sort of finalizing our language, and the cycling club has volunteered to pass out brochures to local homeowners and to affected businesses. I know we're looking at the borough is going to be putting it in the newsletter. We're going to have it up on the website. We're going to put it up on the message boards, the message boards around town. I forget the term for them. So things are moving pretty well. We have a budget, a provisional budget of about $1,500 for the project. This is money that we'd already allocated kind of earlier this year for similar work. I think that's where we stand on that. Michelle, you have anything that need to add on that?
No, not really. I mean, we're going to be sort of kicking off the parking study task force officially this week, with communication going out to everybody who's on the task force. Maggie Dobbs from the county and I have done some preliminary sort of groundwork and met a couple times, and so I'll report back when there's something more to report.
Okay, we did get an update on the EV charging stations. They're on their way. We're right now looking into a possible ordinance to cover charging for electricity and making sure that those spaces are reserved for electric vehicles only. So I'm going to be going offline with John Walco on the details of that, and we'll talk about that again in committee next month. And we got an update on the PRP that the state has gotten back to us with some minor comments, but otherwise it looks good. Aaron, I can't hear you.
Finance and Administration, Cindy.
Nothing major to report. I mean, it's budget season. Sean has been reporting that out to you. At our last meeting, we had folks from the police pension fund just come and really kind of walk us through the investment strategy, where we learned more. Mona, unless you have anything about business privilege tax, yeah, please go ahead, and then I'll turn it over to Fred.
Okay. And I would have brought this up at the last council meeting, but I think we kind of ran out of time. But I did meet with both Sean and Matt last month about the business privilege tax. I think we're all in agreement that it should be among the top priorities for our borough. It's a revenue generating measure. And the borough administration the borough staff is committed to working on this, so that, I think over the next year, it could be one of our top priorities with council's agreement if council would agree on that. And in talking with them, we talked about there's several things that we can do to ensure up-to-date tax data. So I don't know if you want me to get into all the details of it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of work. I think the updating the contract, annual licensing applications, integrating notices into zoning and building and permitting processes, discussing a business census process. This would be another administrative item that the staff would be taking on. That's not a small amount of energy. There's definitely a bit of work that needs to be done for it. So I really want to thank Sean and Matt for putting a lot of good thought into this already, and their dedication to improving our borough records in this area, as they've done in so many areas of our borough since they've been here, I think is really commendable. So it is something that they think is a top priority, and if council thinks it's a top priority, I think it's something we need revenue right now. So did I miss anything, Sean? I don't know. Is there anything? I didn't want to get into all the nitty-gritty details that we talked about. Is there anything else you'd like to say about it, or?
No, that's a good summary.
Okay.
All right. I think Cindy was going to go to you, Fred.
Yeah, so we had a lengthy discussion with our actuary and one of our pension fund trustees. They talked a lot about the process, and we talked about the current asset allocation of the pension fund. So as I've discussed before, council made a decision a few years back to alter some of the underlying numbers of the pension fund. They assumed a lower return on the investment, which in turn necessitates the borough spending, putting more money into the pension fund to make sure that the end result is there, basically. And the asset allocation was changed as a result of that. It was moved mostly to out of stocks into bonds, basically. And the trustees, the trustee who was there spoke kind of about his philosophy, and he felt that kind of conservative stance, I think it was in keeping with his own ideas of where the market should go. So he expressed, a lot of approval with that decision. However, both the actuary and the trustee acknowledged that this was a sort of a very conservative stance. Most other pensions are invested more aggressively, and they have more aggressive assumptions about investment growth. So we asked for them to come back with kind of some numbers for what it would look like if we kind of moved to a more traditional asset allocation for pensions, which is about 60% stocks, 40% bonds, or the equivalent. I mean, something with that kind of risk profile. What it would look like for the borough's contributions, and what it would look like for the chance of a bad result. So right now, we're invested more conservatively, which means we're insulated from trouble in the stock market. So what are the chances that the pension fund would have a lot of trouble? So they're going to come back to us, I think, next month or later this month, Sean, with some numbers. The actuaries calculate every year, starting, I think he said in December or January, they calculate the borough's obligations and the parameters of the pension fund based on any changes. So any changes that we make, it would be good to have them in by the end of the year. That's a good opportunity because that is when the calculations are done about the pension fund. So we're hoping to get this information and then make an informed decision by the end of the year about whether we should invest more aggressively with the pension fund. There's potential significant savings if we actually realize increased investment income.
All right, thank you. Any questions about that?
Just a comment that one thing that kind of stuck out to me is, at first I was thinking maybe we should go more aggressive, but the trustee mentioned when we're each thinking of our own personal pensions, we put our money in there and we're leaving it in there for years and years. And this, needing it for a borough operating year to year as we are is a very different kind of scenario. So I don't know, maybe other municipalities that are doing more aggressive investments already have larger reserves than we do. I don't know. So just like
maybe they can bring some of that information, recommendations when they come back to us.
Yeah.
Andrea?
I was just, with greater potential for risk is for reward is obviously a greater potential for risk, and we got to consider, our potential liability in the event that the stock market doesn't perform as hoped. And how will we make up for that shortfall? And where would that money come from? So it's a big decision, and there's a lot of different sides that need to be taken into consideration for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else on infrastructure? Or I'm sorry, finance. Yes, back to you, Cindy.
The final
Sorry,
note.
Fred threw me there.
No, it's all good. Just a final note that we're exploring ways that we can continue to help the Narberth Business Association downtown with both retaining small businesses, recruiting new businesses, and what that will look like during and post-COVID. Nothing really new to report back on this, just kind of letting you know the conversation's continuing. That's all.
Thank you.
Yes,
Fred.
We did have the 201 Sabine meeting under infrastructure on the agenda.
Yes.
So I don't know when you want to bring that up.
You know what? Let's do that right before public comment. That's fine. Okay. We can talk about that. Public health and safety.
Yeah, we just met, as you know, just before this meeting, and a couple things I'll just run through. We recommend the 5,000 allocation for Narberth Ambulance. Narberth Ambulance came and presented to our committee and made the case for their capital needs for the replacement of vehicles, and they've submitted papers, budgets and to justify the request. Sean has these to share with council, and I believe the number's already in the proposed budget. So that's something our committee is recommending to the council.
I will add, I think it's really been a transformation for the borough to have a process to request information and documentation and the need from these external agencies versus us sitting around a table and just trying to make up numbers or wonder whether the requests are justified or whether they're in proportion to other municipalities that they may serve. And it helps us to know that we're being proper stewards of the public's funds. And I'm really glad that council embraced that process a few years ago. And I think although there were some hiccups because it was new for a lot of these organizations for us to be asking for this documentation, I think everybody's beating to the same drum now, and it's better for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So our committee is also going to review the operating budget that Sean has prepared over the next few weeks to see if we have any specific recommendations to, regarding line items that pertain to public health and safety. And it's our understanding that we reviewed this with Sean, that we could still make some changes to numbers in our December meeting. We also have received our committee complaints about rats on both north side, south side. And I'm going to work with the mayor, the vice president, the manager to prepare an official communication that could go out in the weekly email and advise property owners, how to manage it if the problem is on their property, and what to do if it's a neighbor's property. So we're going to lay that out for folks. The next item is the face mask ordinance. So our committee had recommended signage, and the staff is working on that. I believe they've been ordered, a number of signs. So that will help. And then we also discussed a proposed amendment to the ordinance. And so we have language that has been drafted by John Walco that we reviewed as a committee. And I'd be happy to share that, Aaron, however you would like to handle that.
Yeah, now is fine.
Um,
That way the
let's see.
public will have a chance to hear it before they have an opportunity for comment this evening.
Okay, so it's very short. Sean, would you like me to share screen? I think that means making me a co-host, or should I just read out loud?
I think it's pretty straight and to the point. And
Yeah, I can just read it.
Go
yeah,
ahead, Rob.
Okay, so this would pertain to section 1.3, part B of the ordinance that we passed. And the language in part B says inside or upon any borough-owned or controlled publicly accessible building, park, playground, field, or open space, including but not limited to Borough Hall and 80 Windsor, or the sidewalks and pathways adjoining such spaces, a person shall not be required to wear a face covering upon any outside borough-owned or controlled space or an adjacent sidewalk or pathway if such a person can consistently maintain a 6-foot distance. That was the language that came to us, and then our committee decided to recommend 10 feet distance instead of 6 feet to make it easier to enforce. And this provision only applies to the parks, the sidewalks adjoining the parks. It does not apply to the 5A.
Okay, just the park area, that sort of block of between Haverford, Windsor, North, Wynwood, and Conway Avenue, except for the private homes.
Right, and Sabine Park, I think also.
Yeah, and Sabine Park. Okay. Okay, so you'll be prepared to make that motion to advertise that amendment under action items this evening? And then
Yeah.
we could have a further discussion. Okay. Okay.
Oh, and okay, so that was that piece. And then the other thing, we had some discussion with Chief Gallagher, and he informed us that the de-escalation training that had been canceled or postponed because of COVID has been rescheduled for this month of November. That's the art of de-escalation offered by the Delaware Valley Trust.
Okay.
So we were pleased to hear that. And then we already discussed the shift coverage, but that was something that we just want our council colleagues to be aware of in terms of budgeting for the Lower Merion MOA.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move to public comment. Any members of the public? I'll start with Kim Bezak. Do you have any comment this evening?
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I just had two things I wanted to touch on. The first was just a comment about the buses, the school buses running in the borough now 4 times a day. Myself and a couple of other parents at our bus stop at Dudley and Price have noted several really unsafe instances of motorists cutting off the school bus to try to not have to wait to jump it. So I just wanted to bring that to attention if it hadn't been brought to attention yet, because of the obvious. It's very frustrating to see. And it happens so quick, you can't even get your phone out to catch it. It just is kind of like there and gone. So just putting that on your radar. The second thing I wanted to touch on was I do follow the borough meetings pretty regularly. And I noticed recently, it came to my surprise, that there seems to have been a switch from McMahon Engineering Services to Pannoni. I tried to go back and look for some information about how this transpired. So I was hoping to just get a little bit more information about this. Seemed to happen kind of closed and unexpectedly. So I was hoping to find out a little more about that. And if this is interim, when can we expect an open competitive process? Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Metric, anything just informationally you want to add?
No, the borough made a decision to change traffic engineering service providers, and council took action to do that, to change it to Pannoni. Michael Schneider with Pannoni has stepped in and been really helpful, at least in the first couple weeks of that relationship. And we look forward to working more with Pannoni on traffic engineering needs for the borough. And we thank McMahon for its help. McMahon is a very good traffic engineering firm, and it was just time to go in a different direction.
Okay. Carol Marie.
Hello, council. I have a comment and a question. As far as the face mask ordinance, if you are saying that the distance needs to be 10 feet rather than 6 feet, doesn't the state mandate 6 feet? So can the borough supersede what the state mandate is?
I actually think it would be the reverse. If the state mandate holds at 6 feet, but we would not enforce our ordinance at less than 10 feet. I mean, I'm sorry, unless it was 10 feet.
All right, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have a question about something that was said at the infrastructure meeting, the last infrastructure meeting. So I was asking about the building development plan for the building part, so the redevelopment of the building part. And Fred Bush said it would be 2 years, about 2 years before there would be development done on that building. I also talked about running the leases out and with the callback on the leases, or the callback on the leases after before 18 months, which basically gives them a 6-month extension on their leases. Then I also asked about the park side, what the development timeline is for the park side. And Fred Bush said something that was very concerning that I'd like to ask the council if they share this thought. So Fred Bush said, and it's on the record at that infrastructure meeting, it says, as with 100 Conway Avenue, we can level it tomorrow if we choose. And he went to say, not that we choose. And my question is, does this council share that thought that you all can level the playground tomorrow if you choose? Is that in the plan for redeveloping the property, developing the park side, and then going later on and doing something with the building? And the question is, budgetarily wise, where is it in the budget that and what would be done on that property? It seems that with the meetings, Aaron, that you had, the impression that we all got was that there's nothing in the immediate plans, that there's going to be a lot of public comment and public input and to see what the public wants. But it was very concerning when, Fred's comment was, hey, we can do it tomorrow if we want to.
So I'll say a couple things. Number one, every council member is entitled to their opinion and they can say whatever they like, but it takes a majority on council or a majority with an override of a mayor's veto, a supermajority, to actually have any borough action. So unless there's a vote at the table, I don't think that members of the community should sort of be overly concerned about the comments of a council member in any particular setting. It helps you to understand where that council member might stand, or maybe the point that they're trying to make, but they cannot enact borough action on their own. Secondly, you're right. There is nothing in the budget to make changes to that property right now. So without the funds and without a plan, again, the fear that there is some imminent action is unfounded, and it's just not possible. Third, all of the leases have an 18-month recapture period in them, which means it would not be possible for us to move those tenants out until 18 months after we gave them notice that we wanted to do so, and no notice has been given. I believe that addresses your concerns and points. We are going to continue, as discussed at the large 201 Sabine meeting, to solicit additional community feedback, get an RFP proposal from RES that summarizes community goals that will be discussed in public at the table here at a council meeting. We will choose whether to amend it, adjust it, or accept it, or all of the above in any order. And then it will be a public RFP that goes out, and we will see what comes back. Once we get a result back, council will continue to review those, discuss, in public what those proposals look like, and then the council at this table, which is not a real table anymore, will have an opportunity to vote on any future course of action, and the public will again have an opportunity to voice its opinion. So I encourage everybody to stay engaged, to stay listening if you are interested in the future of that property. But there is zero chance that something is going to happen by surprise, or that something is going to happen in the year 2020 that will set the borough or that property on an irrevocable path to development.
How about 2021?
The odds are zero that something is going to happen in the next couple months, because we don't have any plan or information. And when we get a plan, you'll know.
Thank
All
you.
right, you got it. Any other members of the public? Mr. Spear, I'm thinking no. All right, we'll move on. Public comment is closed. Action items. The agenda I saw did not have any action items, so I'm imagining 8A would be the mask ordinance proposal. Go ahead. Well, the agenda I have was also cut off to one page, so I might be missing something.
Okay. Sean, I see a motion here to approve advertising.
Correct.
Help me out.
I have the correct. Okay. Great. I'd like to move to approve advertising of 2021 operating budget.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of advertising the budget? Aye. Yeah, thank you.
There's a B. I move to approve an extension of review for subdivision and land development 3 Elmwood Ave.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay, great. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
That wasn't me.
Metric.
I apologize.
I figured that. All right, is there another one, Cindy?
Nope.
Okay, now to you, Rob.
Okay, so I move to amend the mask ordinance as follows. This is section 1.3, provision B. It would read, inside or upon any borough-owned or controlled publicly accessible building, park, playground, field, or open space, including but not limited to Borough Hall and 80 Windsor Avenue, or the sidewalks and pathways adjoining such spaces. A person shall not be required to wear a face covering upon any outside borough-owned or controlled space or an adjacent sidewalk or pathway if such person can consistently maintain a 10-foot distance from all other persons that are not within that person's household.
Is there a second? No second. Seconded by Mona. Thank you. All right. Any discussion about this amendment to the face mask ordinance? Cindy.
I'd like to ask that we wait and see how this operates. You're anticipating issues with kind of arbitrary feet at the height of a COVID rise that we don't even have signs up yet. I'd like to suggest, if our goal is to normalize mask wearing in public space, if the anticipated concern is enforcement, I just feel like 10 feet is arbitrary. And I'd suggest that we pause. Let's get the ordinance actually operationalized. Let's work with police to create more of a guardian mentality of public health and safety in this space, and then reassess if an amendment needs to be made. I think we're kind of being reactive until we even have the data to suggest that there needs to be a change. And I'm cautious of doing that at a time where we see COVID cases rising, and calls from national scientists like Dr. Fauci that we should be encouraging mask mandates.
I have a comment, just to, if I might, discuss this for a moment with Councilperson Rickards. Cindy, I hear what you're saying and completely agree that we shouldn't be reactive at a time when we're seeing an increase in the rise of COVID. However, I want to remind you of the conversation we had when we passed the ordinance, that we were intent on passing the ordinance so we could get it in place before we saw the rise in COVID, with the intent that we would loosen the restrictions for the parks and playgrounds, specifically to allow people to be unmasked when they're on their own in the parks and playgrounds, or when they're appropriately socially distanced from other people while in the parks, while they're in the fields and parks. And I think we discussed it in public safety, and we agreed that the standard that John Walco codified in this amendment made sense to us still. Furthermore, we're introducing this at a time before it has become really a custom, or before we've actually, I forgot the language you used, but it was very good about, really implementing this in a way that it's really cemented in the minds of the public. So I think we're doing this early enough that really do want to anchor this sort of the safety of mask wearing in public, particularly in the areas where we're mandating it all of the time. But we also want to anchor in the minds of the public that if you're in the playground and the parks and you're sitting alone on a bench and you're using the park, say, for passive solo recreation, you won't be challenged by law enforcement if you're more than 10 feet away from another person, you're not wearing a mask. And you're not going to be searched for a mask if you're not wearing one. I think we've just attempting as the committee to make a reasonable accommodation for something that we previously discussed in pretty good detail at 2 previous council meetings. So I want to voice my support that we continue and go forward with this amendment.
I hear you, and just to counter you, I would suggest we let the police do their jobs first and learn from that, because you might find out that kind of an arbitrary 10 feet, in fact, does not help that. I would also suggest that police do use discretion, and I know some folks are uncomfortable with that, but they do, right? And if we didn't have that, then we couldn't have traffic laws, right? Or because we couldn't enforce every single time you were speeding. Or you wouldn't enforce the context of speeding. Driving to get somebody to a hospital is different than speeding because you're texting and listening to music. And I think that we have to trust police in their role of public health and safety officers in our community to first see what this enforcement looks like in our parks, and then come up with an amendment rather than kind of arbitrarily. So I would suggest that we hold off on this. We let the police do their job. We really embrace the fact that we have a small police force. We can really capitalize off of community policing and relationships here, and then adjust or change course as needed to address all the things that we spoke about at the last meeting.
I'd like to continue with you in this debate for a moment, Cindy, because if you remember at the last discussion, I think we all agreed that the police are certainly capable of doing this job, and that they'll do it, that our police department will do this appropriately. I also think we also agreed, and I think I heard very clearly from you and some other council members, that we don't want to create laws that we're not enforcing. And I think when you talk about police discretion, you may be talking about, the police officer deciding what they're going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce. And I think what we've tried to do as a Health and Public Safety Committee is come up with a rule that makes the police enforcement easier on our police officers, that they don't have to spend time in the parks and playgrounds and even monitoring people who are solo by themselves or very distant from other people for mask wearing, and that they can spend that time there. That time is better used in our business district, where mask wearing will be mandated, as we've mandated it. This is, I certainly trust our police to do a good job. I certainly know we'll learn from their experience and their enforcement experience. But I think we also don't want to put ourselves in a position of having a law that won't be enforced. And that's why the Health and Public Safety Committee is wanting to loosen this a little bit.
Okay, I would do good. I just argue, why don't we give it a month? Maybe the police come back and say 10 feet's not helpful. It should be 20 feet. I don't see
it's not just about the 10 feet. It's about where you mandate mask wearing.
Okay. Again, that's my perspective. But
because it's not about 10 feet in the business district. It's mandated at all times in the business district, whether you're walking alone or with a group of people.
Yes.
Who else has a comment? Mona, and then Andrea.
Cindy, listen, I agree with you on the importance of the mask ordinance and normalizing mask wearing when the numbers are going up, and they might start increasing exponentially, and we might potentially be in a worse place than we were in March and April, based on what some experts are saying. I don't think that restricting it to, so that people can sit out there if they're not near anyone else, I don't think that's arbitrary. I think, our interest is in enforcing the governor's mandate. And I think it could be interpreted that we're going beyond the governor's mandate if we say that anyone sitting in the park that's nowhere near anyone else has to wear a mask. So that's one concern. I think it could be interpreted as going beyond the governor's mandate, which I'm not interested in doing. And I think when you have to balance the rights of individuals against the public health, I think it's really important to have a compelling governmental interest, which we do in safety during the pandemic, but you also need to make the means narrowly tailored to meet that health justification. And I don't believe it's narrowly tailored if people can't sit by themselves when there's no one else around them without a mask on. That's not really a narrowly tailored way to carry that out. But I'm really interested to hear what the chief has to say, if the chief has anything to say about this at this point. But I do want to first make one more quick, couple more quick points, just because, some people brought up, some residents brought up in the last meeting that they did not think this was a good use of our police time and our enforcement time. And I know that Michelle had mentioned that, COVID is now the leading cause of death of firefighters, according to the U.S. Fire Administration. It's also mentioned by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and the Officer Down Memorial page that it's also the leading cause of death of police officers now. So I think it also is in the interest of our first responders to normalize mask wearing. And someone also said, our police shouldn't be doing this. They should be doing traffic stops or focusing on traffic safety. Well, COVID has already killed more than 5 times as many people this year than all the people who died in 2019 from motor vehicle accidents, according to the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration. So I think this is important. It is a very good use of our time. And at some point tonight, if the chief is interested in weighing in on what would make enforcement easier, 6 feet, 10 feet, or something else, I'd be curious to hear. Because I also do have a concern that possibly, I think Carol Marie raised an interesting point, which I hadn't thought of until she raised it, that the 10 feet does create a stricter standard than the governor's mandate, possibly. So that's a question in my mind now. Thank you.
Hey, Andrea, go ahead.
So I think the amendment simply clarifies the intention of what Borough Council is attempting to do with the rule. And I think I took into consideration, Cindy, your comment that you don't want our officers having to go around with tape measures, and kids are hanging out with each other, and I'll see them and I'll say, "Where's your mask?" And they're like, "Oh, we're 6 feet away." In reality, they're about 1.5 feet away. So it's meant to say basically a larger space or a more confined space, and it's intended to give a reasonable amount of distance before an officer steps in and asks for the mask. So I think it just clarifies intentions. It makes it more clear, and I just think it makes the ordinance just more clear in terms of expectations of what we're looking for.
Go ahead, Fred.
So I am concerned about the sidewalks. I think it's, if we're asking for people to keep 10 feet of distance, that means like darting into the street to avoid people. That doesn't seem like a good idea. So I think we should just not have the sidewalks included in here. The interior of the park, is one thing, the sidewalks are another.
Okay.
Wait,
I think that makes sense, Fred. I agree with Fred on that point.
Yeah, so I would say sidewalks, the mask ordinance remains in place as originally, conceived.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my preference.
Michelle, did you have a comment? And then I'll swing back to Mona.
Sure, I can just, I hope I didn't open up a can of worms I think I loosely used things like compelling interest and narrowly tailored. That's the wrong rhetoric. I don't want to encourage the use of that. That's not at all what we're talking about here. There's no fundamental rights or suspect, classes here. All we need is really a legitimate, reasonably related to a legitimate government interest. And the face covering ordinance is, I'm not concerned about exceeding the state's standard. I would be concerned about imposing something that was laxer than the state standard. I think that would be a problem, but imposing something that, because of our own local conditions, is slightly, and our own need to sort of do our own local enforcement under our own local conditions is slightly stricter than the state standards. I'm fine with that. I don't think that creates a problem. I like the change that you've made. I think it captures what we probably mostly our consensus view, which is that when folks are in the parks, we certainly don't really want our officers enforcing the mask ordinance against a person who's just sort of alone in the park. That, and the way it's written, that's a possibility. And I hear what it's, I mean, you're right, Cindy. Law enforcement officers use discretion every day. Thank goodness. We count on them to do that. And they're going to use discretion even with this amendment, should we pass it. I mean, it's a part of the job. And I trust them to do that, and to do that professionally and reasonably. But I think that this makes a nice balance. I don't worry when I see a person walking across the park alone without a mask. I think it's, I'm not worried about that situation. But I do worry when I see groups, especially of young people, socializing, and none of them are wearing masks, and they're certainly not maintaining 10 feet distance. And this gives our law enforcement officers the tools they need to enforce better safety measures and say, hey, kids, you got to mask up when you're doing this, and in our parks. So I'm comfortable with that. And Fred, I agree that exempting the sidewalks improves this amendment just a little bit. So I would vote for it either way, because I think it's a better solution. But I like your suggestion.
Can I ask Aaron, I'm sorry, has the chief actually weighed in on this? Like, did the chief say 10 feet? I mean, I would like to hear. I mean, we're trying to say, like, let's give the officer.
Well, can I rephrase the question?
Sure.
Why 10 feet?
Well, and I could do a big. I'd like the actual law enforcement officers to chime in.
I'd just like to say,
well, I mean,
this discussion happened in committee, and it was actually, since it happened in public, I'll say that it was a suggestion, it was a recommendation of our mayor to the committee, and so we discussed it after she made this recommendation. So she may be best equipped to explain the provenance of this suggestion.
The point is, I wanted to give it a larger space rather than a wider swath around the person, so that they don't spread their germs, potentially spread their germs to people within a reasonable space. I mean, the point was to give a wider swath than just 6 feet, because 6 feet is in that gray area where kids are kind of hanging out typically, and the intention is to do a wider swath versus just a smaller swath.
Okay. So I think everybody's had a chance to weigh in with their opinions. So I will see if we can have a vote here. All in favor of the ordinance as written, say aye. All opposed to the ordinance as written.
You mean you're talking about the amendment?
The ordinance, which is the amendment to the prior ordinance.
Okay, got it. All right.
What's on the table? Say aye if you're opposed.
This is I'm confused, Aaron. I'm not sure.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is, so there was a majority, so it's off the table now. If someone would like to make a new motion for a reworded version of this amendment, then we can put that on the table and discuss it. Rob, you may have taken some notes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a version of this that would still be 10 foot, but it would take out the sidewalks. So okay. I could propose that.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so I move that we amend the mask ordinance, section 1.3, provision B. And the amended portion would read, A person shall not be required to wear a face covering upon any outside borough-owned or controlled space, or if such person can consistently maintain a 10-foot distance from all other persons that are not within that person's household.
Okay. Is there a second? Bob seconds. Is there any further discussion?
Can we ask
All-
the chief to comment on this?
I mean, we
I-
can.
I would love to hear from the chief.
Okay, well, it's the chief. Go ahead, chief. If you have a comment, we're welcome to hear it.
Well, thanks everybody for your trust. We certainly appreciate it. As we know that this is uncharted territory for all of us since this has been enacted, and we're trying to do our best with it, and we're certainly going to continue to do that. As of right now, I'll give you a status of how things have been going so far. Number one, we haven't gotten that many complaints via the 911 system about masking situations. There is only one that we have that was documented in our record management system. I'll spare you the details on that. It's rather complex in the interest of time. The other status update that I would like to provide is that, in the spirit of the ordinance, we now have plenty of masks on hand that we try to give out to people on an as-needed basis instead of issuing a non-traffic summary citation. And we try to issue the warnings. We try to follow the spirit of the ordinance. And that's one of the things that we had to do about the recent record management system entered. In regards to 10 or 6 feet, yeah, listen, I can understand the situation on both sides. Whatever is decided upon, we will certainly continue to do our best. However, at the same time, I think as written, it looks like it's pretty well understood. We understand the intention of it, the spirit of it, the good intentions of the order, and I think that's why we don't have any reservations, any bad stories right now about it. However, at the same time, just take into consideration that these are all growing pains for all of us as we enforce it, and people are going to see when there's non-compliance issues afoot in the borough. When that officer may, in fact, be tied up on an auto accident, a traffic stop, a building check, a response to a radio call. We often only have one officer on duty at a time. And also take into consideration, if there is a radio call that comes out about a masking situation, county radio will classify that probably as a disturbance, which means that's going to be a two-person response that not only will our 1 or 2 officers, if on duty, respond, but also a Lower Merion officer will respond as well if it's a 2-person job. So these are just some of the things, that I can kind of summarize, kind of like an up-to-date feel of what I have now overall regarding the 6 feet or 10 feet. Like I said, I'm going to go back to the ordinance itself. We're kind of coming to an understanding of what we've been dealing with now since it's been written and put into place. If it's adjusted to 10 feet, we'll certainly do our best, but we still have to follow the spirit of cooperation with it, with the warning system, the mask that we have on hand in our marked patrol cars, and actually following the ordinance itself. We want to certainly lead by example, and the officers have been doing a really good job with that.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Mona? You're muted.
Can I ask a quick question, Chief? I mean, my guess is maybe you haven't had many complaints because people are concerned about, they might not like it when they see people not wearing masks and they might feel unsafe, but they're not necessarily interested in taking that step to call 911 because they feel it might not meet the same emergency status as other things. And you mentioned that might mean, you might potentially have 3 officers responding. So my question is, how should residents go about communicating concerns to the police if they're not interested in saying, well, I don't need 3 officers showing up on the scene or something like that?
Well, if it's an issue with masking and we're not there and they want to report that and they feel it's important to report it immediately, I'm always going to recommend calling 911 because that's how all calls are generated and prioritized from county radio, whether it's emergency or non-emergency. So people call 911 about violations of noise ordinances, things like that. So this is no different, Mona. I would say certainly dial 911. But with that in mind, we have received complaints in other ways, whether it's through in-person contact, whether it is through email. We have received some complaints in other ways. We've just mitigated it appropriately and handled it the right way. But all in all, you know, I do understand that there's going to be a lot of different opinions about this across the community, not only just from elected officials, but also from the residents and the taxpayers. We certainly try to do our best for all the parties involved. And, you know, and I'll give you an example, you know, without getting into the, you know, to the details of it. The recent call that we had was from a person who did not reside in the borough, who complained about a local business owner for non-mask compliance. And when we got there, one of the things that we found that were within compliance with the ordinance is we did find the employees in compliance with that. Now that may have been after the fact by the time we got there, but we have to react on what we see, and we found compliance. In addition to that, you know, if that person wanted to push the issue further in order to get a non-traffic summary citation issued, that may be best intentioned, but there's also a first warning system within the ordinance. So we have to provide that first warning. We just can't go to a knee-jerk reaction on issuance of a non-traffic summary citation. So we have to file, you know, that letter of the ordinance itself. And we explained that to the person involved as the complainant, and they accepted that. And we reached back out to them for additional comments, a written statement being the reporting party, but that person did not want to contact us back. So these are just some of the, you know, the experiences that we're having. That's just one example. But all in all, I do think that it's, you know, it's certainly, I think a lot of the people that we're coming across, they do feel that it's best intentioned. So we haven't really heard too many people coming up to us as police officers saying, hey, I hate this ordinance, or hey, I love this ordinance. I would say it's, people feel that it's best intentioned, but, you know, all in all, are there some that have their reservations about it? Yeah, sure. But I just say in policing, you know, constantly that we will do the best that we can for the community, as always, and we will put our best foot forward. The one thing that we really prefer to do, and I would just really like to emphasize this, when they are children, we really do want to give the children a mask than rather give a non-traffic summary citation. And that includes everybody's children here on the call as well. And I'll explain why. There is, when you do get hit with a non-traffic summary citation, that can appear on your PDCH, what's known as your criminal record. And then after that is paid, you know, you would have to get that removed from your record through expungement after 2 years. So I can tell you, I speak from experience on this. My son recently got hit with a local borough ordinance in a jurisdiction in New Jersey, down at the Jersey Shore. And when he did, I had to fully understand and embrace the fact that after he remitted payment for that promptly, that I am going to have to engage a lawyer at some point in time on his behalf and get that expunged from his records. Because I know from being in this field for as long as I have been, that will in fact appear on his criminal record. Now, I'm not excusing his behavior. He was held accountable, but that will appear on his criminal record. So we certainly try to take that into consideration when we are dealing with children. We make sure that we stress to them what's needed, but at the same time, if we have a mask and we can give it to them and they draw compliance from that, we prefer to do that.
Right. Thank you, Chief. We've had a lot of discussion on this topic. Can I ask for a vote on the ordinance amendment as currently worded, which is not including sidewalks and a distance of 10 feet in the park areas? All in favor? Aye. Bob? Are you in favor? All opposed?
You're muted, Bob.
Well, the ordinance carries. So the amendment will be advertised and we will discuss next month whether to adopt the amendment. Thank you. Is there, given that my agenda is only 1 page long, Mr. Metric, what's next?
I was muted. Please count me as in favor of that amendment. Thank you.
So noted for the record. Thank you.
We have announcements, adjournment, and executive session in that order.
Right. Okay. Any announcements? A motion to adjourn. So moved. Seconded. Seconded anyone? Mona, I'll get you. Mona, before I ask for the vote, what do you like to say?
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to second the adjournment. I thought we were going to talk about 201 Sabine before we.
You're right. Okay, well, let's withdraw the adjournment. 201 Sabine.
Sorry,
I'm a little forcocked this evening.
We happens to us all.
Okay, 201 Sabine. Fred, you want to do it, or would you like me, or who would like to discuss it?
Forum.
Yep. Well, I'd be pleased. I think you all attended. Is that correct? Everyone on council? Okay. Rob missed it, but that's okay. So I think we had a really productive meeting. We had more than 220 attendees at some point. We probably ended the evening with about 160 attendees. It went on for about 2 hours. We went through a slide deck talking about the history of the property, council's history with it, the income earned from it, and where we are trying to go. I tried to drive home to the community that we have an obligation as a council to look at the highest, best use of the property from the perspective of community goals, and that we are interested in everybody's opinion. We collected a lot of opinions. We got a lot of email opinions ahead of time. We got a lot of email opinions afterwards, and Beth from RES will be updating us as part of preparing a draft RFP, which will come to us for review. So the next steps are we will get a draft RFP. I mean, she has a little more work to do. There's a Survey Monkey and some other things, but at some point soon, we will get a draft RFP, and then we will take a look at it and we can discuss it in public forum. I'm sure we will get public comment about it, and we can choose to revise it before it gets sent out, or we could choose not to send it out. So comments or questions on that? Mona.
Sorry, Fred, Fred, go ahead.
Is this going to be coming to infrastructure or to council as a whole?
I think there's no reason that it can't come back through infrastructure on its way up to council. I don't think you guys are going to hold it in committee for any extended period of time. And I think that the smaller group probably can apply the most effective sort of first pass, versus it all coming to the whole council. I'm fine with that. Mona?
So I do want to ask again, I know this was suggested at the meeting again, and I do think it would be really important to do a survey as broad as possible, maybe post it on the website and sent out through the emails, rather than just limiting the survey to the nearby residents. And so I know
we did discuss in our postmortem of the meeting a way to be able to send out a survey. Maybe Sean can add some color. We want to make sure there's no ballot box stuffing, right? We want to make sure that we're getting, it's fair. Everyone in the community has the right to an opinion, but what is not fair is using electronic means to submit multiple opinions as if it was coming from multiple people when in fact it's coming from one. And it's something that happens, So we have some ideas about how we might be able to get that out there without that problem. Sean?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the fields that would go into the survey that would identify the respondent in a unique way. So we can construct the survey that way. Also, we had the reporting that came out of the webinar event. We have everyone who registered for the event. We have all their emails, so we can contact them, and we can use some direct marketing techniques to get this message back.
So if you had a Zoom account and came to the Zoom meeting, we have the ability to contact you. If you just click the link and we're not logged into Zoom, we don't know anything about you. But it gives us a couple, 100 and something more names that we can add to our communication list of people who were clearly interested.
And are we going to be posting the recording of the meeting as well as, are we posting the entire chat or a FAQ that's based on?
I think Beth is working on
for folks who couldn't attend the meeting and want the slides and they want to inform themselves.
We're going to post the pre-comments that I received. We're going to post the post comments, She has the pre-comments. She and Kelsey are working on the FAQ, sort of condensing down the multiple questions just to make it more readable, and then the recording. And I think probably in the next, hopefully before the end of this week, we can get that up there. Okay, there were a lot of questions, so it will take a little bit of time, but we can get it done. Anything else? All right. Motion to adjourn still on the table, sort of irregular business. Here we are, but all in favor? Aye. All right, the meeting is adjourned. We will pause for 60 seconds to clear the room, and then we will go into executive session. Good night, Heidi. All right.